Hey, good morning, everyone. We got another Cirucci team brief here, a packed Cirucci team brief. It's me, Eric, we got Nicholas, Johnny, and George with us this morning. February 14th, 2020. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone out there. But we're just to kick it off. We got another jam-packed show full of good information. Just to tie it in, I'd like to start off with this. This is kind of like a hidden covert fact, which shows how the Jesuits have been influencing the United States of Romerica for quite some time now. But that being the first United States Secretary of Commerce. The Commerce Department is a very key department for the Jesuits to control. The first the current Secretary of Commerce, Wilbur Ross, went to Jesuit Regis High School in New York City. And Wilbur Ross actually bailed out when Trump's casinos went bankrupt in the 80s. Wilbur Ross actually bailed him out, and now he's the U.S. Secretary of Commerce, Jesuit-trained, a billionaire. But the first U.S. Secretary of Commerce, going all the way back to 1903, his name was George B. Cortelyou, or Cortelyou, Cortelyyou. He was Jesuit trained at Georgetown University, served as an advisor to 4 presidents. Again, this being the first U.S. Secretary of Commerce, George Cortelyou. Cortelyou was also Secretary of the U.S. Treasury during the Panic of 1907, which is when the J.P. Morgan deliberately crashed the economy. Well, Morgan and the Thomas Fortune Ryan and the Wall Street elite deliberately crashed the economy to bring in the Federal Reserve System. And then George Cortelyou was also one of the most vocal advocates for the creation of the Federal Reserve System. Being the first Secretary of Commerce, Jesuit trained at Georgetown, George Cortelyou. And I just have an interesting quote here from the book, The Grand Old Party, A History of the Republicans by Louis L. Gold, page 112. But this Jesuit-trained George Cortelyou was Theodore Roosevelt's campaign manager when he was running for president as a Republican. It says here, Theodore Roosevelt had to let surrogates do the campaigning for him, and the Republicans rallied behind the winning effort. The campaign manager, the former presidential secretary, and head of the Department of Commerce and Labor. That's the thing, too, that the Department of Commerce used to also encapsulate the Secretary of Labor position, which now is separate. George B. Cortelyou managed an efficient canvass. Republicans reached out to a diverse array of ethnic and religious constituencies. So this is I'm just going to continue here from the quote. Roosevelt had placated the Catholic hierarchy during his first term by protecting the church's interest in the Philippines, also making presidential appointments on a non-sectarian basis. The steps led to an editor of a Catholic newspaper to say that he, Theodore Roosevelt, was a man without prejudice, sectarian bias, or intolerance. End quote. And I'll link the photo here because I want to bring in that quote from the Philippines because this Secretary of the Commerce, Jesuit-trained George Cortelyou, was very involved with the American colonization of the Philippines and with the transferring of the Spanish infrastructure to the American infrastructure. And I actually have a letter that that was written to George Cortelyou in the Commerce Department, speaking on the Americanization of the Catholic hierarchy in the Philippines. And I'll link that here. I think that's very interesting that the first U.S. Secretary of Commerce was educated at Jesuit Georgetown University, which I think is significant, that being George B. Cortelyou. This was in and around the same time that the Jesuits created the Bureau of Investigation with Roman Catholic Charles Joseph Bonaparte, which would then become the FBI. So I'll link the information with that in the chat after this. And I also wanted to mention too, this is just another fact which shows how much power the Pope and the Roman Catholic Church has, is the amount of countries that have papal coins being circulated in their currencies. For instance, in the U.S. Congress actually passed a bill July 17th, 2000, called the Pope John Paul II Congressional Gold Medal Act in the 106th Congress. Let me see. I'm going to screen share here so I can show the coins. People aren't aware of these coins. Almost every single country has one of these. Here's a photo here from the U.S. Mint. Here's the Pope John Paul II coin that was created by an act of Congress. You see here, and I mentioned here like this. So like you see, the U.S. Congress cited this Pope as a moral leader of the world, and I pointed out in this, and I know George has mentioned that this was even admitted by Cardinal Dolan. Pope John Paul II worked in an he worked in a Solvay plant in Krakow, Poland, which was a subsidiary of the Nazi chemical giant IG Farben. Obviously, here the U.S. Congress gave a congressional gold medal to Pope. The U.S. Congress gave a congressional gold medal to Pope John Paul II in 2000. This same Pope worked for IG Farben, manufacturing Zyklon B gas, poison gas, during World War II at the Solvay plant in Krakow, Poland. Solvay was a subsidiary of IG Farben, and this Pope was great friends with pedophiles Jimmy Savile and Jeffrey Epstein. And I linked the photos there. You see here the U.S. government, you see here in Section 2 of the findings, you see here the Congress finds that Pope John Paul II is the spiritual leader of more than 1 billion Catholic Christians around the world and millions of Catholic Christians in America, and has led the Catholic Church into its third millennium. 2, the U.S. Congress recognizes John Paul II as a preeminent moral authority. Did you look at that? He says here, and I'm just going to highlight some of these bullet points. This one I thought was really interesting here. The U.S. government says, transcending temporal politics, Pope John Paul II has used his moral authority to hasten the fall of godless totalitarian regimes, symbolized the collapse of the Berlin Wall. Jesuitical doublespeak. You see here, like this is profound power that the popes yield here. This isn't just in the United States. This happened in Canada as well. You see my screen is still sharing. Here's Canada has a special coin for Pope John Paul II as well. Here's a 1984 papal visit gold-plated commemorative coin. And here's a page here from the Canadian Mint. We have 5 papal coins just being circulated here in Canada. How many of these papal coins are all over the world? I bet over in Europe. This is even bigger up there. You see, here's a canonization coin here for popes John the 23rd and John Paul II. Here's another coin, and these are expensive coins. This one costs $1,000. Here's another one here. Here's another John Paul II coin. So this shows that the power that the Catholic Church yields, that so many quote-unquote secular governments are honoring the popes by creating coins for them.
Yeah, and it's funny how you brought up commerce, and isn't it funny how like one of the vows of the Jesuit order is the vow of poverty, So like and quoting from Paul Graf von Hosenbroek, ex-Jesuit priest and 14 Years a Jesuit, Volume 2, 1911, page 71, he says, the scope of the vow of poverty, also of the special vow of poverty of the professed Jesuits, is explained by the following passages in the constitutions. Whoever wishes to live in the society must be convinced that food, drink, clothing, and bedding should be of such kind with appertains to poverty, and that the worst things which are to be found in the house are assigned to him to produce greater self-denial and spiritual development. Anyways, he goes and reads the whole thing. There's a bunch of examples in here that he gives of the Jesuits like totally like messing up this vow of poverty out in the public. He says, where is it? Says,
well, while you're looking for it, Nick, I want to burrow down on just how many American institutions are directly traced to Rome. We talked about in the recent past, I'm pretty sure this was you again, Eric, the United States Navy, founded by devout Irish Roman Catholic John Barry. We just talked about earlier in the show, one of the biggest criminal organizations supposedly protecting us. The Fascist Bureau of Inquisition, founded by devout Roman Catholic Charles Joseph Bonaparte, great-grandnephew of Napoleon Bonaparte. And an even bigger criminal organization, the Catholic Intelligence Agency, formerly the OSS, Office of Strategic Services, founded by Wall Street lawyer, Knight of Malta, William Donovan. Directly traced. Then we can get into the hidden hands behind people like George Washington, who had a painting of the Virgin Mary up in his house.
Here's a good quote of the Jesuits' poverty by the 1840s, the mid 1800s Jesuit provincial of Germany. Mauritius Meschler, S.J. This is what he says. He says, "Our poverty does not consist in privatation, but in our aloofness in the midst of possessions. Also, especially in the fact that we do not call anything our own amongst the objects which we are surrounded and which we use. Every pencil, every piece of paper, every book, every pen, and every sheet of note paper, and every person's money in the world." Our food, the rooms, and the clothes which we use have to be asked for. We are possessors or masters of nothing. Hence, we are poor.
Look, you can look up, as an aside, you can look up what the Militant has, particularly on these criminal bishops and cardinals living like kings and queens. I have an entire dossier on it.
They got their treasure stored up in earth, not in heaven, though.
Yeah, let me tell you something. When you see these cardinals and bishops living in these massive mansions, it's completely blacked out from the media. Completely blacked out from the media.
Yeah, here, check this out. Check this out. Ignatius Loyola instructed Lainez, who was the confessor to Duke Cosimo de Medici. So, like, this just shows the black nobility don't control the Jesuit order, who afterwards played an important part in the Council of Trent and became Ignatius' immediate successor of the order. This is what he said to Lainez. He quotes, "He was to insinuate to the Duke's wife, who was to be confined shortly, that she should act in the same manner as Queen of Portugal had acted before her confinement, namely, make a settlement of 500 gold florins on the Jesuit college, which then was like $500,000. But yeah, K. von Lang points out that the Upper German province of the Jesuit order received in the years 1620 to 1700 alone in insuations 800,000 florins. Amongst these are a single sum of 15,000, 32,000, 56,000, 92,000, and 117,000 florins, which then is like $20 billion. Like, I did the math a long time ago. It's insane. In 1718, a member of the Putinger family bequeathed 100,000 florins to the Jesuit College of Ellwanger. From about 1700 onwards, the donations of the Upper German province were only noted down in the secret books. The size of sums, which were frequently gigantic for that period, was to remain concealed. The yearly fixed revenue of the Upper German province, which consisted of 583 persons, accounted in 1656 to 185,950 florins. According to von Lang's minutely verified documents, it should be added many thousands through gifts, donations, fees for masses, etc. It was especially Duke William V of Bavaria who laid the foundation of the wealth of the Upper German Jesuits. He endowed the Jesuit College in Munich with a yearly income of 2,670 florins. He met their endeavors to get the most popular places and pilgrimages into their hands by building them a college at Altötting. He presented them, moreover, with the abbeys of Bildberg and Mönchmünster, and contrived, in spite of opposition of the district and against papal decrees, that the Jesuits connected with the foundation should become members of the Bavarian prelacy, etc., etc. But the Archduke Leopold, Prince Bishop of Passau, a boy of 14, endowed the Jesuit college at this place with 30,000 florins. In the Jesuit order in 1773, the Upper German province possessed a gigantic land property, which distributed as follows. The Austrian state officially estimated the wealth of the order directly after its suppression. It amounted to 15 million 514,220 guldens. This is like, these are billions of dollars in dollar money today for Bohemia, Moravia, Silesia. What does he say? He says, but this does not seem to have been nearly all. For the president of the Imperial Esquire reports under the date of August 16th, 1782, that more than 120,000 guldens of Jesuit gold have been discovered at Genoa, and more than 18 millions were supposed to be lodged in the order's name in Holland, 4 millions which belonged to Austria. The president even learned the names of banks at Frankfurt which were negotiated the payment of the interest, but the further levy arranged by the Bethman firm led to no results. The following facts from the same period show the Jesuits' wealth into bold relief. The Bohemian and Austrian Chancery Courts reports under date of April 28, 1781, that the outstanding claims of the Jesuits on private individuals, 3,214,000 guldens, have already been collected. 2,674,939 guldens were converted into ready money, and in addition to this, 381,654 guldens in earnest money would be collected. The Emperor Joseph II considered it unseemly that the state, as an assignee of the Jesuits, should have private debtors, and privately advised Prince Schwarzenberg, who was placed in sad difficulties through the notice to redeem this outstanding debt, to sell one of his estates in the German Empire so that he might pay the proceeds in the Austrian government credit bank and thus liquidate the debt contracted with the Jesuits. And remember, I don't know if you guys have heard it, but or read it, but on May 26, 1647, John Palafox, the Bishop of Los Angeles in the Spanish province of Mexico in Spain, or in America, wrote to Pope Innocent X, and he said, "Most Holy Father, I found almost all the wealth in immovables and treasures of this province of America in the hands of the Jesuits, who still possess them. 2 of their colleges have 30,000 sheep without counting the small flocks, and whilst almost all the cathedral churches and all the orders together have hardly 3 sugar refineries, the society alone has 6 of the largest. One of these refineries is valued at more than $500,000. $500,000? I did the math. It was like $28 billion. $500,000 at that time. $500,000, and this single province of the Jesuits, which however only consists of 10 colleges, possess, as I have said, 6 of these refineries, each of one which brings in $100,000 yearly. Besides this, they have various cornfields in a numerous size. Also, they have silver mines, and if they continue to increase their power in a truly Jesuitical way, it's smuggled into the and wealth as excessively as they have done up to now, the secular clergy will become their sacristans, and the laymen their stewards, whilst the orders will be forced to collect alms at their doors. All this poverty and all these considerable revenues, which might make a sovereign powerful, serve no other purpose than to maintain 10 colleges. To this may be added the extraordinary skill with which they make use of and increase their superabundant wealth. They maintain public warehouses, cattle fires, butchers, stalls, and shops. They send a part of their goods by way of the Philippine Islands to China. They lend out their money for usury and thus cause the greatest loss and injury to others." The funny thing about usury is, like, it's a sin. In Leviticus it says you shall not cause your brother or sister to pay a sum of money after a certain amount of time, which is like interest. So it's causing people to pay interest on something is against the commandments of God.
Usury was created by the Templars and perfected by the Italian bankers like Medici and Farnese.
Yes.
That was fantastic information there. And
there's even more, but I won't go on. It goes even crazy. It goes even crazier.
That quote from I first saw that quote from Halifax in Theodore Greisinger's book, and I'll link the preface I wrote from the Dollar in the Vatican, because I quote a decent sized text from Theodore Greisinger's book from 1875 on the Jesuits. which is very similar to the quote you just read there, Nick. Greisinger talked about how the Jesuits were bringing in millions of dollars through their reductions in Paraguay, that they had hundreds of thousands of hides of cattle.
Yeah.
This I want to show you how this ties into today. I'm going to link this. This was an incredible document I found here. This is through Father Felix Morlian. This shows that the Vatican Jesuit intrigues,
Oh, and he's supposed to be a Dominican priest, right? But there's a quote in a book that says he's a Jesuit.
Absolutely, yeah. That comes from, and I'll even link that book. I found that book in a book actually analyzing the Vatican's involvement in Hollywood.
There's pictures of him sitting down at like dinner tables in Rome with his full with his full Dominican like Cossack on, but he's like smoking a cigar with like people at a dinner table that are wearing like suits.
He was a full-out gangster. This Father.
Yeah, I know. Looks like some mob.
Right here, like I have my screen share on here. I just want to confirm. Okay, it's on. Yeah. I have the official document from the Inter-American Development Bank. This was this is the bank for the Organization of American States. It's kind of like the Latin American United Nations, totally Jesuit-controlled institution. But right here on the heading of this note, you see RE. This is a letter that a vice president of the bank sent here to Walter Rostow, who was Lyndon Baines Johnson's head economic advisor. Walter Rostow coined the term nation building, for instance. But right here on the headline, it says Father Morlian and Program of Catholic Church for Indoctrination of Latin American Priests and Divulgation of Principles of U.S. Free Enterprise System. And it's full out. I'm just going to read the bullet points here. So what the banker Grayton Upton says here. It says, in effect, what Father Morlian now wishes to obtain is the following. 1, a serious review and orientation in this whole effort by the U.S. government. I understand Ambassador Reinhardt is well informed on the matter. The strong moral backing of the U.S. government in a discreet fashion of this effort. This is an effort to brainwash the Catholic hierarchy of Latin America in crony monopolistic capitalism, because the Jesuits are the ultimate cartel capitalists, as Nick's quote that he just read showed. In this respect, as a first step, Father Morlian wants to arrange a lunch in which you both and hopefully Lincoln Gordon would be present with as many of the U.S. directors as possible, where you'd indicate the moral support of the U.S. government for this effort, a support which would hopefully contribute towards substantial private contributions from U.S. business. That's going to Jesuit Father Felix Morlian's intelligence operation to launder billions of dollars into South America. 3, an investigation of the possibility of financial.
Eric, hang on just a second. Eric, hang on just a second. George, are you doing sit-ups? The new microphone works phenomenal.
You gotta mute your microphone, man.
The new microphone works super, George. I'm hearing every grunt and breath. Are you out walking the dog? Do me a favor. Stay until you're ready to jump in.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's the birds in the background.
Yes, it sounds like you're doing calisthenics. All right. No, adore you. Eric, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to let George know the mic is working really good. Thank you, William, for the donation. We're trying to tweak it and reduce his volume. Eric, I apologize for.
No worries at all. I'll wrap it up here and get you guys' comments. But then he says this letter came from Grayton Upton, a banker of the Inter-American Development Bank. He says an investigation for the possibility of financial support for Father Morlian's effort by the U.S. government through an appropriate agency. He admits on the next page here that Father Morlian has already gotten billions of dollars sent. He said, P.S. I understand that commitments have already been received for contributions of business of $250 million, and that Father Morlian expects this to be increased to $1 billion in the next few weeks. And then the banker makes one other really interesting comment. He says, I first met Father Morlian at the Caracas meeting, that's Caracas, Venezuela, of the CICYP. That's Father Morlian's pro-Deo intelligence organization. And the branch in America, this was a CIA conduit, but it was the American Council for the International Promotion of Democracy under God. And this, I'll link this document batch. You can see the board of director list of that organization, and it's pretty explosive. Who is on that?
Can I just say one more, 2 more quotes from this book? One of them shows how the Jesuit order got expelled from the country Portugal for dealing in commerce. It's pretty crazy. Here, I'll read it right here.
Well, was that when the Palm Bell expelled them?
Yeah, the Palm Bell, the Knight of Order of Christ.
Yeah,
He had all the ships ready for them already.
Yeah, I
to
think
go to
that
Corsica.
read the quote, but I know there was like an outrage in Portugal at that time because the Jesuits like looted millions and millions of dollars from the Paraguayan reductions, and they were supposed to essentially give, like they were supposed to pay taxes to the Portuguese government. The Jesuits weren't paying any tax; like they were hoarding all the money for themselves.
Yeah, well, check this. It says an agreement between the information given by the merchant holding a trustworthy position. Okay, so this is from Ball, Graf von Hosenbrooks, 14 Years of Jesuit, Volume 2, 1911, page 91. It says the agreement between the information given by a merchant holding a trustworthy position and the above quoted statements of the Lazarus priests and the missions of the missions Etrangeres is noteworthy. We also encountered Jesuit trading on a large scale in the island of Martinique. The commercial transactions of the Jesuit Lavalette in the island of Martinique resulted in the bankruptcy of the large mercantile house of Lyonce and Gueffre at Marseille. The general of the order, Centurion, cost 500,000 livres to be paid as a partial compensation to the mercantile house by the French provincial of the order. The Jesuit de Sacy, but the 500,000 could not avert the ruin of Loyancy and Goafra. The Jesuit de Lamarck, who was sent as visitor by the order to Martinique, was also obliged to acknowledge that the Lavalette had been drawn into illicit commercial transactions. Lavalette's liabilities amounted to 2,400,000 livres in 1761, which is like billions of dollars, like probably hundreds of billions of dollars. In 1762, the Jesuit order took up 86 of the bills put into circulation by Lavalette, amounting to more than 1 million. By way of counterbalancing the Lavalette case, the order had recourse to a method which had frequently made use of and which was almost always efficacious in face of the credulous multitude. It caused a certificate of good conduct to be drawn up with reference to his spiritual zeal, his success in the education of the young, his zeal in preaching, hearing of confessions, etc., by the Bishop of Marseille and numerous inhabitants of the town, for the affair had caused the greatest stir in Marseille. But such artifices had no effect on the parliaments of Aix and Paris, and in August 1762 they condemned the order to pay 1.5 million livres. The Jesuit Soulier, who tries to cloak Lavalette's offense and that of the order by every possible means, was obliged to admit these facts. And there's another quote. It's called by M. Martin, the manager of the French trading company at Potengeri. I'll bring it up. It's Francois Martin. He was born 1635 and he died 1701. He was a French Roman Catholic. He was the first governor general of Potengeri, which was the Jesuit province in the French India Potengeri. Commissioner of the Jesuit created East India Trading Company, created by the Jesuits in India. And he was author of Memoirs of Francois Martin. And he says, it is certain, and this is 1831, I believe, or no, 1731. He says, it is certain that next to the Dutch, the Jesuits carry on the greatest and most productive commerce in India. Their trade surpasses even that of the English, as well as that. And remember, the English had like the greatest colony, like the colonization, whatever, right? And he says their trade surpasses even that of the English, as well as that of the Portuguese who established them in India. There may possibly indeed be some Jesuits who go there from pure religious motives, but there are very few, and it is not such as those who know the grand secret of the company. Some among them are Jesuits secularized, but do not appear to be such, because they never wear the habit, which is the reason why Surat, Agra, and Goa, and everywhere else, they are taken for real merchants of the countries whose names they bear. For it is certain that there are some of all nations, even of America and Turkey, and of every other which can be useful and necessary to this society. These disguised Jesuits are intriguing everywhere. They seek the secret intercourse which is preserved among them, instructs them mutually in the merchandise which they ought to buy and sell, and with what nation they can most advantageously trade, so that these mass Jesuits make an immense profit of the society to which they are alone responsible, through the medium of those Jesuits who traverse the world in the habit of St. Ignatius and enjoy the confidence, know the secrets, and act under the orders of the heads of Europe. These Jesuits, disguised and dispersed over the whole earth, and who know each other by signs like the Freemasons, and invariably act upon one system. They send merchandise to other disguised Jesuits, who, having it thus at first hand, make a considerable profit of it for the society. This traffic is, however, very injurious to France. I have often written respecting it to the East India Company trading here, and I have received express orders from it under Louis XIV, who was a Knight of Malta, who was had 3 Jesuit confessors. We already talked about this. To concede in advance to these fathers whatever they might require of me. The Jesuit Tahard alone owes that company at this moment. So this is alone. This Jesuit owed the East India Trading Company at this moment above 450,000 livres. I did the math. It's approximately 118 million $386,000 today. Those Jesuits who like to hard pass and repass between this quarter and Europe are regulatory directors and receivers of the bank and of the trade. And if you want to know which calendar the entire world uses, because people go, oh, the Jews use their Jewish calendar. No, they don't. The Muslims use their moon calendar. No, they don't. The Chinese use their Chinese calendar. No, they don't. You want to know what calendar the whole world uses? It's the calendar that banking uses. When someone has to transfer, $2 billion on the stock market by Friday, which calendar are they using? Using the Gregorian calendar. The Jesuit created Gregorian calendar. If that's the calendar that all of banking uses, that's the calendar every single person on earth uses.
Created by Jesuit Christopher Clavius.
Yep.
And the Chinese use the calendar given to them by Matteo Ricci.
Yeah.
The Jesuits rivaled the English and the Dutch as the greatest commerce power of that time. Both England and the Netherlands at the time were Protestant nations. And remember that the foundation of, communism put into practice.
I would say they were spiritually Protestant, but they weren't temporally.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. That there were no powers in the Netherlands or England that were devoutly living their Protestant Christian faith. The only one that came close was Edward VI, and he was murdered before he could make it to the throne. Remember that communism, basically created by Thomas Aquinas, was put into practice by the Jesuits in the South American reductionist settlements. And it was basically slave labor. The Guarani Indians were put into slave labor camps. Where did all the goods go that they made? They were shipped back to Spain and Portugal.
Johnny.
Yeah, George.
Sorry for being so quiet. If I may chime in, if I can just add to what you said, you could basically say the Jesuits developed communism in South America about 40 years ago in what is now Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay, and you made a specific reference to the Guarani Indians. They based their writings, as you said, on Thomas Aquinas, specifically his Summa Theologica, but they had a couple other sources. Plato's Republic, you're talking over 2,300 years ago. He lived, 300 or 400 BC. Also, the writings of Thomas More, Utopia. So it was an eclectic hodgepodge of various ideas and philosophies, which reminds me of something. I wasn't going to present on this today, but this is something Eric and I were talking about a week or so ago, is that one of the purposes of the so-called Enlightenment, and even that very name should trip some red flags, or you should those were red flags, was to basically Catholicize or to re-Catholicize Protestant academics. And a major emphasis of theirs was to reintroduce Greco-Roman ideas into Europe, into Protestant Europe, because they became the ancient Romans and Greeks were considered to be the pinnacle of civilization in terms of government, philosophy, economics, and just about every other endeavor. And that is how names you have the ancient, you have the Hellenistic triumvirate. You have Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates. There were, I forgot who tutored whom, and you're talking like 400 BC, over 2,300 years ago. So Plato was noted for the Republic, which served as a template for all future government, all future modern governments. And that, as I said, that was considered to be the ideal. Now, the fact, I want to keep this G-rated. The fact that they're all pederasts is just, is a bit.
George, I can throw in some more for you if you like to highlight and underline your point. The most important aspect of this, we were talking about this before the show started, that a top priority of the company of Loyola, of the Jesuits, is to be anti-Christian. And therefore, any source, George, any pagan source, any atheist source, any pagan source that is anti-Christian is highly preferred. That's why all of so-called education promotes this ideal that the Greeks and the Romans were the most brilliant civilizations on the flat earth in relation to how to govern ourselves. That's why the frauds, the sexual deviant Jesuit theater of NASA immerses all of their phony outer space shenanigans in Greek mythology. It's because it's anti-Christian. And so if you want any visibility on anything remotely Christian, you only have one source you're allowed to go, and that's Rome. That's the pretend Christians in Rome, George.
And of course, I was just thinking about this the other day, that in my humble opinion, there were several purposes for the creation of NASA, the National Aeronautic Space Agency, in the 1950s, and ultimately in the alleged moon landing in 1969, was to basically put a kill job on flat Earth. See, any of you out there who might be questioning whether the Earth is globe, we just answered the question, because we have all this proof. See, we have these photographs from the moon looking back at the globe.
Yeah, in the Meliquire and Kofer, ex-Jesuit priest, who in Giovanni B. Niccolini's book, he says he was assassinated by the Jesuits in Rome or in Venice, I believe. And anyways, in his book, The Monarchy of Solipsis, the empire of the ego, the ending of the book is, I'm translating right now. It's really hard because But anyways, he said the whole ending of the book talks about how the whole Galileo trial was like made up, like it was all theater. It was like blown cover as cover. Get people to think that the Jesuits hate this, so that they become more interested in it. Like when you take something away from a child, you tell him not to do it. What's he gonna do? He's gonna go and do it again, right? It's just like that. It's like all of humanity is childish. Like they don't read the scriptures, they don't read the Bible, so they wouldn't know what the real cosmology is anyways. How are we gonna get people interested in a cosmology that they're not interested in? Let's say it's condemned. Let's say it's heretical. So this will give it more popularity. It'll make them rebellious, So he talks about how the whole trial of Galileo was just a sham. And he was the first chapter of this book, The Monarchy of Solipsis, is insane. I've never heard someone describe the Jesuit order in such a way. It's crazy. I'll read some of it right now, and then I'll go into what I was gonna say. But
I first came across reference to that book. Theodore Greisinger mentions it in his book,
Mhm.
History of the Jesuits. Like he mentions how it was kind of like a utopian book written by like an ex-Jesuit who exposed the ins and outs of an order through like kind of he uses like an allegory to express it.
Yeah, well, check out this. Is the first chapter. It says general idea of the order of solipsis. That's what he calls the Jesuit order. He says, what name is best suited to the government of which I undertake the description? That, or kingdom, or monarchy, or republic? I make you judge. I do not find words energetic enough either in Aristotle or in Plato himself, the oldest of all. It is a new form of unknown government in our hemisphere. It is, however, no less admirable, and one must not despise knowledge of it. If nothing is more efficacious than its maxims, to formulate the manners of the people and princes, to ensure happiness and tranquility of the state, to enlarge it and preserve it, in a word, to give to the subjects all the happiness which one can taste here below. It is a marvelous agreement of prudence with concealment, a magnificent with contempt of glamour, a magnificence with contempt of glamour, and economy with the greatest riches. This would be the place to inform the reader of the climate and the situation of this kingdom, and its extent and its limits, the kingdom of the Jesuits. But not one of those who have already traveled there could do so, and I have not the temerity to undertake it. Similar to Homer's Odysseus, I have traversed the cities of these people, have observed their customs well, but for the situation of their climate, it is why I have no certain knowledge. The construction of their world is not like ours. The number and names of their poles are all different. The moon is found more often for them in its vertical point than the sun in its south. The places have no difference between them, not even underground. What is on the left is also on the right. It seems at least that their world should have only one common center, not at all. It has several. Still they are not motionless. All this diversity depends entirely on the will of the order. Things will be different if he wants to. We only believe what he decides. Reason or common sense may oppose. We do not listen to them. It is not allowed to reply, to find reason in everything, to applaud everything, to approve everything. Nobody knows better than me the risk that we run by wanting to act otherwise. And he
George,
goes on, but it's pretty insane.
George, your camera is making me seasick.
Yo, look at those shoes, man. Those are fire. Are those the new Adidas?
I'm digging those old school sweatpants.
Yo, he's doing the gym, man. He's doing his workout.
He's being lazy and walking his dogs tied up to each.
Okay, so well, I'm sorry, I can't disappoint my fans. Yeah, and
What's the character? What's the character from the Tim Allen show? The one that talks to people from behind a fence like this?
Oh, yeah, yes, I could go look it up.
Well, you gave your fans a shot of your legs.
Oh, now he's in the car.
I say, hey, real quick, as far as lifestyle commerce, this is a very important point. So when you have a communist Catholic mega corrupt criminal like Andrew Cuomo, communist Catholic governor of the People's Republic of New York, son of the communist Catholic governor, Mario Cuomo, of the People's Republic of New York. Why? Because nobody in New York was qualified to step up. Just like right now, our previous governor in Georgia's People's Republic of Mexiponia, nobody qualified to step up when we had Governor Jerry Moonbeam Brown, the former Jesuit. He may have even been an ordained Jesuit. We were told he left the Jesuit seminary. We couldn't find anybody else. We had to resuscitate his ass from the 1970s to bring him back. So when Andrew Cuomo, who, by the way, is listed as a friend of Jeffrey Epstein. In other words, highly likely that he was out there raping children on Epstein's island. The corrupt piece of crap that he is, that pulled that outrageous, unsafe act after that ludicrous, what are we calling it, George? Specious ensign up there in Newtown, Connecticut. They railroaded that. They did not get any national legislation passed. But after that ridiculous false flag, they were able to really lock down some of the more Catholic communist states like New York. And Andrew Cuomo led the way with an illegal ratcheting up of their already outrageous gun laws. So you got someone like Andrew Cuomo stepping back and opening the doors for all of the children who are now adults who have been raped mercilessly by Catholic clergy, saying, we're going to step back the statute of limitations for a year, temporarily, but for a full year. Seemingly, what a death blow to the Catholic Church. And we're going to start crying because all these churches are going bankrupt, right? Meanwhile, the Catholic Church has riches beyond your wildest dreams.
And Kumo's just controlled by the Archbishop of New York. What's his face? Dolan.
Bingo.
And he's Jesuit trained and educated at the Rome, the Gregorian College University in Rome.
In other words, it was the Catholic Church's idea to give her puppet Andrew Cuomo the appearance that he's attacking them and opening the doors for all of the thousands of children, now adults, who have been mercilessly raped by clergy to go ahead and get paid.
You want to know something crazy? And when the Jesuits were creating the Freemasonry in France in 1710s and 20s in the College of Claremont and the Cathedral of Saint Germain, before they made the G of the Jesu and the Superior General of the Jesuits the middle of the square and compass, you want to know what was in the middle of the square and compass in France in Freemasonry, Grand Orient Freemasonry? It was the hammer and sickle. So when the communists of Russia used the hammer and sickle for their symbol of revolutionary Marxism and fascism against God's ordained order of the earth and all natural good things, they used the symbol of Freemasonry.
Oh, that's really interesting because maybe this would be a good segue if you want to go into your research on Manly Hall, because I've read a lot of books, but I remember reading one of his Horizon journals. He actually attributed the Soviet hammer encyclical to the astrological houses of Saturn and Jupiter, which I thought was interesting because Saturn's symbol is the Sith, and then the sickle he tied it to Jupiter, which I thought was very interesting because to me was kind of Jesuitical. We showed that Albert Hartl, the Nazi Catholic priest Nazi, literally said that the Kolkhozy collective farms of the Soviet Union were directly modeled off of the Jesuit Paraguayan state. The Soviet Union themselves use a Roman laurel wreath in their official seal of the Soviet Union, very much so how communist China.
And wasn't it Lenin? He was Jesuit trained and educated in Paris, I believe, by the Jesuits. But what was I gonna say? The hammer, it's like to hammer out the believers in Jesus.
I've got one earlier.
And the sickle is like a scythe, like for the harvesting. It's to cut down the wheat, and to grow the tares.
That makes sense that the Manly Hall viewed that as Saturn. I just know in the Masonic pagan Greek tradition, Saturn is like the cutter, like he's like the kind of the Grim Reaper.
Yeah, Saturn is the Roman version of Azazel, which is the leader of the 200 Watchers who ascended Earth, mated with female women, this daughters of Cain, created Nephilim.
I've got
the bloodlines now of the people.
I've got a reference earlier than that. Thomas Munster of the Zwickau Prophets that popped into Wittenberg out of nowhere to attack Martin Luther, almost certainly as an agent of Catholicism. Thomas Munster used the hammer and sickle for his heretical movement while he was attacking Martin Luther.
But he was very much of like an anarchist, Munster.
Absolutely, and a fall guy, and a fall guy came in like a bull in a china shop to attack Luther, and do so without the appearance of being Catholic. Real quick, so Thomas Munster and three prophets, Nicholas Storch, Thomas Dreschel, and Marcus Stubner, were this is Johnny Cirucci saying this on page 240 of Secret History. Storch, Dreschel, and Stubner were Jesuits in all but name. They presaged the Society of Jesus by a little over a decade, as their attack began in 1522, and Loyola would found his company in Paris 12 years later. Munster expertly wove appealing reforms in with his poison, first translating the Psalms into vernacular German, but then attacking the foundation of Lutheranism, which was justification by faith alone. He was expelled from Wittenberg and took root in Allstedt, where he railed against Luther, calling him Dr. Liar and the Wittenberg Pope. Munster's most shocking invention was a form of communist agitation, later perfected by the Jesuits, where he lured the boldest Protestants into suicidal and needless violence. He used the hammer and sickle.
Well, if you want to get into Freemasonry now, I can bring up the Manly P. Hall quotes I got connecting him to the Jesuits.
Sure, and I'll pull up my work. And before we leave the wealth of the Catholic Church, the Militants did a story on Cardinal Donald Wuerl, who is at the bare minimum a protector of pedophile clergy. And he said,
even the Jesuit trained Josh Shapiro's report tied Wuerl to being like covering up pedophile clergy. That was even in the PA report.
Where was Wuerl? Wuerl was cardinal of, is it the Archdiocese? Yeah, the nation's capital.
It actually had, and the report noted that, and he had to step down because there's a little bit of backlash after that came out.
The nation's capital, and this is from, and I'll post this in the chat. This is from the Militants, Michael Voris. If you ask the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., where exactly Cardinal Wuerl lives, expect to be given several different addresses. Cardinal Wuerl actually lives in a swank Embassy Row penthouse in one of D.C.'s wealthiest neighborhoods. His quarters are approximately 12,000 square feet and feature a private rooftop deck built just for his eminence. Cardinal Wuerl spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on renovations to his penthouse, according to journalist George Newmar, who is also a good Catholic. Newmar discovered the fact through the architect contract. Listen to this. Listen to how buried this was, because journalists, quote unquote journalists, won't touch this. These monsters living in its unbelievable wealth. Newmar discovered the fact through an architect contracted to redesign the penthouse, who lists the work done for Wuerl on his website. This comes on the heels of several revelations regarding the lifestyles of various high-ranking prelates. That's bishops and cardinals, folks. The habits of German clerics are well known, and many conservative bishops have been, quote, outed by the liberal media. Have they? I haven't seen any.
Yeah, right.
While prelates like Cardinal Raymond Burke, whose relatively modest Rome apartment is only a third the size of Wuerl's, received criticism by leftist media, Cardinal Wuerl's significantly more lavish and secretive living arrangements have been ignored. What a shocker. I'll put this in the chat. Yeah, go ahead. If you want to switch tracks, I don't know if Eric, you want to jump in on something. I know that Nick's chomping at the bit to talk Freemasonry.
Yeah, I'll go in.
Yeah, if you want to go into the Freemasonry stuff first, Nick, go ahead. No, that's
all right, I'll just set the groundwork.
Oh, sounds good. Yeah, that's great information there on Cardinal World, Johnny. All these guys live like kings. I saw you linked the CNN article. The CNN actually did a good expose back in 2014 and showed pictures of 10 prominent Catholic cardinals in America who lived in mansions. They show a photo of Dolan's $35 million mansion in Manhattan. That's a good link.
Yo,
Yeah, not common knowledge. Absolutely not
can
common
someone
knowledge.
screen share these pictures? Because I can't. I gotta read something, so I can't really screen share it.
Yo, what are you trying to put up?
It's in the private chat. Just a link.
Okay.
Just screen share that.
Stand by. See what this does to me here. All right. So this is your Freemason tracing board.
Yep.
All right, Eric, it's available for you if you want to throw it up there.
Yeah, I'll throw it up here on chat.
And Nick, break this down to absolute 101's curriculum level. What
Yeah.
is a tracing board?
All right. Is it on the screen?
I'm typing it in here on the search. Is that the?
All you gotta do is share my screen. I've got it up on mine.
Oh, you got it on yours. Okay, I was typing it in on mine. I apologize.
All right.
Okay,
See all these.
I got your
all these-
screen up now, Johnny.
Yeah. All these things. Okay. So the Masonic tracing board is like a Baroque style art. Baroque art was created by the Jesuits. It's pretty much just Hermeticism and sacred
Hey,
geometry
break it down
contained
further.
within the art.
Baroque is a time period of what, roughly 1700s?
Right. Yeah, there's a type of Baroque art called something, I forget, whatever it is. Whatever. Anyway, so the Masonic tracing board is like Masonic allegory of the history of Freemasonry contained within one picture. Now, Freemasonry will have you tell you that, it's all about Adam and Noah and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and David and Hiram Abiff and the pharaohs and the Essenes, and Jesus was an Essene, and he went on to have children, and the Virgin Mary, and she's a virgin even though she had children after. But don't talk about that, because we're Catholic, we don't read the Bible. And then anyway, so that's what the whole Masonic tracing board is about. They tell you it's ancient. Freemasonry is created in Babylon, and then it went to Egypt, and then it went to Greece, and then it went to Rome, and then came to here, etc., etc. Yeah. Well, here's what Arthur Edward White. He was born 1857 and died 1942. American British poet, famous prolific occult writer, 33rd degree Illuminized Freemason, Theosophist, Ariosophist. And an Ariosophist is pretty much it's like Ariosophy. You believe like the Vril Thulian German, Aryan blood of like the Superman, that Friedrich Nietzsche talked about, got from Freemasonry, that they have the Nephilim blood and they have the divine right to rule. Just talking about the Jesuits pretty much. Anyways, he's a transcendental and ceremonial sex magician, right? So you do sex magic, children stuff. He was a co-creator of the Black Magic Rider-Waite Tarot deck. And this is what all witches in like Wicca use, like for their tarot decks. They use the Rider-Waite one. It's created by him. He was one of the most influential members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and the Rosicrucian Society of England, founder of the Rosicrucian Fellowship of the Rose Cross. And he was like friends with Jesuit Aleister Crowley, right? So this is what he says. He says, and this is quoting from his History of Freemasonry. We know the value of all the multitudinous speculations in the theological no man's land of the apocalypse. So he knows all the different views of the apocalypse that people use today, pre-tribulation, post-tribulation, mid-tribulation, preterism, futurism, historicism. He knows them all. That's pretty weird. We do not calculate the number of the beast. All right. We do not denounce the Jesuits. We are not obsessed by infectious terror of papal power and its possible aggressions. On the contrary, we respect the associations connected with sovereign pontiffs and chief patriarchs. We have, most of us, decided that the Pope is neither God's vicar nor the man of sin. Sounds exactly like what the Jesuits believe.
Yeah. So Nick, not to interrupt you, but big picture. So what we see is the Jesuits working behind the scenes and finding limitations, because when you see a collar, when you see a Jesuit, you step back and you say, oh, these guys have an agenda. Then you have other secret societies who don't have a collar saying the same thing. They are more appealing. Freemasons, Rosicrucians, etc., tremendous levels of power, and yet they're not immediately associated with Rome, and they're pretending to be completely aloof. Oh yeah, the Pope, he's not the Antichrist, and he's not the Vicar of Christ. We don't even pay attention to that guy. So whom does that serve? Obviously, still Rome.
Yeah, and then he says, and we are not open to any positive convictions on the identity of the Scarlet Woman or that of the lost tribes of Israel. Okay, so he pretty much just said he was a Jesuit or like a Jesuit coadjutor.
The most important aspect of Christian prophecy, outside, the second most thing important, just barely underneath, who is the Messiah? How do you get saved? Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
just
and
underneath of that, who is the Antichrist? Who is the whore of Babylon? Daniel and Revelation couldn't be any more important. And Freemasonry says, don't worry about it. Don't pay attention to that. We're not even going to focus on. We know all of the various prophecies. We've decided we're going to walk away from it all. Is that what they're saying, Nick?
yeah, they're saying don't read the book of Revelation, which Jesus Christ said, if you read this book, you shall be blessed. You will receive a blessing. He says, don't read it. And the fruit of the Holy Spirit is revelation. All right, so it could be called the book of the Holy Spirit. Don't read that. Anyways, I'll go on to read this quote about the Masonic tracing board. But go on, George.
Okay, may I chime in? Almost all. Okay, we've talked about churches. Okay, but before you talk about churches, so-called Protestant churches, it goes before that. Almost all your Protestant seminaries and Bible colleges, or once Protestant seminaries and Bible colleges, teach this stuff. For the most part, they teach Bellarminianism. Antichrist is a single individual.
Yeah.
For the most part, they teach Riberianism, futurism, that the Antichrist has not come.
Yep.
And many teach Lacunzianism. Don't worry.
They don't tell you to read the Bible. They tell you to, all right, we're going to read one verse of scripture, and then we're going to read 12 books of commentary on that scripture.
George,
but what does the scripture say? It says the scriptures are not open for private interpretation. Let scripture interpret scripture.
George, Bellarmine, Ribera, and Lacunza. Who are they? Those three names.
Okay, I'll tell you this. They weren't Protestants.
Oh. So when Protestant Christian seminaries are teaching Bellarmine, Lacunza, and Ribera, they're actually teaching who?
Jesuitical doctrines.
They're teaching Jesuit doctrines.
Yes. So almost all your seminaries and Bible colleges, by default, originally or otherwise, are teaching at least two, sometimes three of these doctrines.
Don't forget Molinism.
Yeah,
Once saved, always saved.
Luis de Molina, also a Jesuit.
Yes. That's okay. I'm not qualified to address that yet because I need to look more into him. Please.
Well, we explained it on the last show.
Yes, I know. I need to do a little bit more individual research into him, so I'm not going to comment on that right now. Anyhow,
I want to say really quickly, Molina was also the Jesuit, I'm pretty sure, that created tyrannicide. That's the doctrine where it's the right to murder a heretical king or ruler who goes against the doctrines of the church.
Okay. So that wouldn't surprise me because
Regicide.
Regicide or regicide, tyrannicide. Yeah, I think regicide is the proper term.
Okay. So almost all of your prominent Protestant ministers now or the recent past on television, on radio, John MacArthur, Greg Laurie, David Jeremiah, John Hagee, they're all teaching this nonsense. Also, another, now not so much with MacArthur, but Hagee is very much into Zionism. And for those of you who don't know who John Hagee is, he speaks in that very boisterous, histrionic voice that says, Jesus is the Alpha and the Omega. He's the beginning and the end. And I'm not sure if he talks that way in real life, but whenever he's on TV or the radio, he has this very over-the-top voice. And there's a video clip of Hagee, I'm not sure for when, but he says, people often ask me, when will the Antichrist appear? Read my lips. After the rapture.
What an idiot.
Yeah, and he's promoted because he is an idiot. He's promoted because he is the perfect tool. There are no obvious connections to him from him to Rome, and yet he perfectly promotes Roman doctrines. The idea that a typical evangelical fundamentalist Christian is, pardon my language, an asshole. A big, bloviating, overweight asshole who pushes Zionism to an outrageous extreme, to the extreme that it becomes blasphemous heresy in Christianity, to the point where he claims that Jews as a people are not condemned, and this is basic Christian theology, basic Christian doctrine. Without Jesus Christ, you will not have salvation. Basic Christian doctrine. He actually makes the heretical claim that genetically, Jews as a nation or as a genetic people, as an ethnicity, Jews are above that based on some ludicrous lie that he says is found in the Bible.
Get me out of here.
Yeah, that he twists and says that, hey, you know what? Jesus never claimed. This is his book, In Defense of Israel.
Yeah. Go on.
Yeah, Jesus never claimed to be the Messiah, so you guys are off the hook.
Okay.
And by the way, we did that stream 2 or 3 streams ago on how Hagee's brother was a captain of police and raped and abused a little girl that was a family member. We don't know how she was related. Could have been niece, could have been his own daughter. We don't know. A captain of police finally arrested decades later for raping and abusing a little girl within the family. That's his own brother. And by the way, when this was brought to his attention, he did nothing about it.
There you go.
You're talking about Jack Hagee. Now, this is something you brought up before, Johnny. Jack is usually a nickname for John, and that's an odd dynamic there.
Yeah, and you know what, George? It makes me wonder about the identity of everybody talked about. Is this a real person? Is this a twin? What exactly is going on? Jack is not a
alter ego.
There's some kind of weird identity thing going on.
All right, can I say this now?
Sure.
All right, sweet. So if you bring up the tracing board again, whatever. Tell me when we're good.
I can share the screen whenever.
Oh, you want me to bring it up again? My bad. Yeah. You know what, Eric? Might be easier for you to go into the private chat, grab the link, and put it up on your screen directly. In the StreamYard, you got the live comments on the one side, and then the private chats on the other. Nick has placed that link in there you go.
All right, so anyone, just click on the third one. The third one. Or the fourth one. All right, so you got the Masonic checkerboards, the black and white duality of the yin and yang, as above, so below, bullshit. And then you got the 3 pillars, which is the 322, the third strand of Nephilim DNA, the DNA of the Nephilim, the snake wrapped around the double helix. Got all that stuff. You got the you got the ladder of Jacob. It's all fake. And then you got the sun and the moon. Now, okay, I want you to look at this thing, this Masonic checkerboard, tracing board is the history of Freemasonry and allegory, right? Now listen to this. I'm going to paint you a picture. This is a quote from Arthur Edward Wright in the History of Freemasonry. Jesuits and Masonry. It is impossible to believe that there were not Jesuits in Freemasonry, or that they did not follow therein the proverbial policy of their society. They could have no other purpose in view. It is a favorite parable that they manufactured degrees and rights with the object of directing Masonry into the channels suited to their ends, that of the Rose Croix, the Rose Cross, or the Rosicrucian, and Kodesh are quoted as typical examples. It is said also that by other ritual inventions, they sought to retrieve the fortunes of the Catholic House of Stuart, which is the Venetian family of Cecil, which is the Pallavinici family, and the Pallavinici house in Rome. On the floor, and when you walk in, it has the Jesuit seal above it. You can look it up. Quote, in times of exile, by the Catholic House of Stuart, in times of exile, there can be no better case cited than that of Jean-Marie Ragon, who was dedicated in a peculiar manner to the production of private bulls against the Society of Jesus in all its ways under its veils. Realer supposed he had a privilege of discovering Jesuits everywhere in Masonry. As the following summary shows, it will be seen that they had a Masonry of their own, with the life and spirit which they sought to permeate the Masonic order proper. And I have other quotes about Jean-Marie Ragon. In Rome, with Giuseppe Balsamo, also Count Cogliostro, who Aleister Crowley says is the reincarnation of himself. Anyways, Jean-Marie Ragon and Count Cogliostro were seen in Rome in full Jesuit garb. They were part of the chapter of Claremont, and pretty much they used like their blown cover as cover. So they were Jesuits. They went into Freemasonry, or Masonry rather then, and they said, "Yo, guys, the Jesuits have created all these rites and rituals. They're here amongst us. They've created all of this. It's all exposed. They're trying to manipulate you." And they blew their own cover as cover, right? This is what the Illuminati did. This is what the Rosicrucians did. This is what they do, so they can permeate it and infiltrate it even more, right? And then they go, well, okay, so what is the real history? What is the real degrees? What is the real rituals, right? And then they go, okay, well, this is what it is, and then they give it to them. So they create an institution, then they infiltrate that, and then they infiltrate that, and then they infiltrate themselves over and over and over and over and over again. So anyways, this is what Jean-Marie Ragon in 1720 said. 1. In their secret symbolism, the sun at its zenith represents the Society of Jesus flourishing as it was in the days of Louis XIV, the Sun King, who took the King James II into the Palace of Saint Germain in the College of Claremont. And the confessor of James II has a letter from King James II saying, "I am a son of the Society of Jesus." So the King James II, the Stuart, Venetian, Pallavinici, Cecil dynasty member who was visiting Rome all the time, he said he was a Jesuit. That's what the confessor says to Pierre Lachaise, the confessor of Louis XIV, the Sun King, as in the Freemasonic king, the Jesuit king. And so, 2, he says the moon is masonry eclipsed by that sun. So the moon in this tracing board is eclipsed by the Society of Jesus. The moon is masonry eclipsed by the Society of Jesus. 3, the Jesuits proscribed and in banishment were figured by a setting sun. So whenever you see the setting sun in Masonic allegory symbols, it's the Jesuits proscribed and banished. While the moon of Masonry is depicted at the full 4, the Jesuits adopted also the lion as a symbol, typifying their own society and recalling that lion of the tribe of Judah, which is one of the appropriated titles of Jesus in the scriptural symbolism. 5, the letter G in the center of the blazing star signifies the general of the Jesuits and is the holding of the Jesuit general, as in the Spirito Sancto Borgio, the headquarters of the Jesuits in Rome. 6, every lodge of St. John is a lodge of St. Ignatius, because all the lodges of Freemasonry, they're all called like, number 600 and 1942, the lodge of the heart and the fucking chicken sandwich, some stupid name, right? But they're all actually called a lodge of St. John. So every single Masonic lodge is a lodge of St. Ignatius.
Oh, Nick, I don't mean to. Can I just jump in here really quick? Just keep going. This is this is explosive. Like, holy cow! I'm really enjoying this quote. I'm familiar with the Masonic. This is coming from the Masonic author Ragon, because I've read him personally. I've seen Blavatsky quote out of his works, but this is his last name is spelled Ragon.
Yeah, I got many authors from Freemasonry talking about. He was only one of many Jesuits who infiltrated he created Freemasonry.
Just for this source, like what one of his books or pamphlets does this quote come out of?
I can go to another quote later on.
Just for this one here, does this come from? But it is John Baptiste Marie Ragon.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, what book does this quote from the Jesuits? This is one of the most powerful quotes I've ever heard.
Well, I don't have the book open. I'm just reading it from my website, but I can go get it for you.
Yeah, but maybe
the actual citation.
Yeah, maybe after you're done the quote, just so we can post it in the chat.
Because he cited everything in his book.
Yeah, keep going.
All right, so what were you say? Okay, so 7. Nick? Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I mentioned this on previous shows, but there are several secular knighthoods in Japan. But the most prominent one is the Order of the Rising Sun.
Yeah. Well, I think it's called like the Order of the Constantine or something like that. It's a flower. Anyway, there's a bunch of rising sun, all the sun rising in the west. Talking about the Jesuit order. Anyways, 7. So, it's also like heliocentricity, they want the whole world revolving around the sun, right? They want the whole world revolving around the Jesuit order. And the whole Big Bang space heliocentric globe earth cosmology is all allegory of Roman Babylonian Catholic universalism, like the globe earth is the egg and the whole universe is the womb of Mary, Isis, Ishtar, which is like the consciousness which makes up the Babylonian pantheon, right? And then the fallen angels fall to earth, right? The fallen angels fall to earth like the sperm, and they seed the earth, and they mate with the women, the daughters of Cain, and they create the Nephilim. So they create the seed on earth, right? It's all disgusting, perverted allegory. Anyways, 7. The banter of 3 knocks in a certain grade of masonry is an allusion to the 3 vows of the Jesuits. 8. Hiram slain in the society, destroyed by 3 companions, stationed respectively towards the east, south, and north of England, Scotland, and France, from which the Jesuits were banished in the 16th century. 9. The 5 points of mastery are the 5 duties of a Jesuit: zeal, vigilance, hardihood, courage, and consistency. 10. The letters IHS in certain Christian Catholic grades signifying Jesum Hebernus Socium, which is also, Isis Horus Serapis, not Isis Horus Set, which Johnny Cirucci proved. He was the first person to prove it. 11. In 1718, there was a serious debate among the Jesuits on the establishment of Masonry throughout Europe. 12. Many lodges were founded in London between 1721 and 1722. 13. In 1723, there was published a book, the Book of the Constitutions. 13. Meanwhile, the Jesuit masonry was in full vigor at the College of Claremont in Paris. 15. Jesuitic masonry, which began in a tavern, was accommodated to French frivolity by means of banquets. 16. The unknown superiors. Now, this is interesting. Okay, so in Freemasonry, at the top of the Supreme Council of the 33rd degree, the head of it is controlled by an invisible superior. Now, they got the Freemasonry when it was first being created in the College of Claremont. There was every lodge in every country had an invisible superior, and they got this. They got these rituals and degrees of having unknown superiors rule over them from the Rosicrucian order. And the Rosicrucian order in Germany in the 1620s, created by the Jesuits, which I prove on my website. You can go read about all the sources. There was only 12 Rosicrucians at a time, and then there was a 13th invisible master. All right, and it was like the 12 disciples of Jesus, and the 13th was Jesus, right? Some BS. And then so they took this invisible superior and put it into Freemasonry. So the unknown superiors found it 16. The unknown superiors found it necessary to invent a new symbolical language for the concealment of their designs. 17. To reconquer Palestine was to change religion in England. 18. The last crusades signifies the ill-started efforts of the pretender, King James Francis Edward Stuart, who says he was a Jesuit, literally says himself, I am a son of the Society of Jesus. Yo, so this they're telling you, like, oh yeah, the Templars, the Knights of the Crusades and Freemasonry. The Freemasons are the Templars now. You know, like, this is all created by the Jesuits. It's all created by the Jesuits. 19. The Isles of Scotland typify Paris, situated in the Isles of France. 20. Mount Herodum means the College of Claremont. 21. The building of the Second Temple by Zerubbabel is an allusion to the compact between the Jesuits and the Pretender. 23. The Pretender was intended to play a part of a modern Cyrus, Trump, and lead them to Palestine for the building of the new Temple of Jerusalem. 24. The Chevalier Ramses, which he was a Jesuit as well, the Chevalier Ramses Travels of Cyrus is written from this point of view. 25. Saint Alban, the Masonic legend, veils King Charles I. 26. The Company of Jesus is represented in England by the Grand Lodge of York. 27. The great unknown work is the work of Jesuitry. 28. The architect Inigo Jones, an English Vitruvius, is used to serve emblematically for Inigo de Guipuscoa, i.e. Ignatius de Loyola. Jesuitism was identified then with the whole hierarchy of the Latin Church, not by a particular congregation of priesthood within the Great Circle. Its emissaries, being everywhere within Roman ecclesiasticism, were everywhere at all times. So, there's also a thing. There's a difference between so there's a quote by David Stevenson in the Origins of Freemasonry. And so there's a difference. People need to understand there's a difference between Scottish Freemasonry and Scottish Rite Freemasonry. Scottish Freemasonry was created in the 1590s, and Scottish Rite Freemasonry was created in Scotland, and Scottish Rite Freemasonry was created in the 1714s to 1720s at the College of Claremont in France. All right, so there's a difference between them. And Scottish Freemasonry in England was not an allegorical, temporal, political, satanic thing. I'm not saying it was a good thing, but but the Jesuits used this thing that was created in Scotland and usurped it and created it as it is today. But he talks about, but the thing about the Scottish Freemasonry that existed 100 years before in Scotland, before it went to Paris, the thing about it is David Stevenson in The Origins of Freemasonry, he talks about how there's a guy, David Bernard. He was accused of being a Jesuit twice. He was a devout Roman Catholic, but he was accused of being a Jesuit twice. This guy was the founder.
And Nicholas, before we even leave Claremont, let's add that
it was William Shaw. William Shaw, that's what his name was.
The Freemason historian, the official Freemason historian, Albert Mackey, admits that the Jesuits were involved with at least the first 26 degrees of Freemasonry fabricated at the Jesuit university. And Jesuit universities are epicenters of control. Georgetown is the epicenter of control of Romerica. The public sounding University of Seattle is the epicenter of control of Seattle and of Washington State. San Francisco, the same thing. These public sounding universities. So the Freemason historian Albert Mackey personally admits, now he pretends it's some kind of internecine war between Freemasons and the Catholic Church, and yet for him to concede that the Jesuits had such control, Eric, I'm sure can speak.
Well, I have a quote that predates him.
Even better, and as I was going to say, I'm sure
because he was just one of many Freemasonic historians. I have like Joseph G. Findell, David Bernard. I got
Helena Blavatsky in her 2-volume set.
Yeah, I got Albert Pike. I got Robert McCoy. I got Charles William Heckerthorne. I got Jean Emmanuel Hector, who has unreal quotes. I had to translate his stuff from French. No one's even read it, probably in English.
And again,
I also got Joseph G. Findell, Robert Freckway Gold. I got Franz Hartmann. This guy was insane. But they don't just talk about Freemasonry, because Freemasonry, people need to understand, Freemasonry doesn't control all the secret societies. They're just one. They're just one secret society. People think Freemasonry is the tippity top of all secret societies. There's the Rosicrucians, there's the Martinists, there's the Prior Zion, and then there's the Freemasons. There's the Order Temple Orientis, the Golden Dawn, et cetera, et cetera.
So all Nick, let's break that down even more, and I'm sure George and Eric can speak up to this. For the average person, the average blue pill person on the street, who looks at you like, what Freemason? What are you talking about? What are examples? How about NASA? How about all the original moon astronauts? Like 90% of them were Freemasons. The number of United States presidents who were Freemasons.
Yeah, well, if you want to know why the Jesuits created Freemasonry to be a temporal thing, they hijacked Scottish Masonry of England from their Jesuit Roman Catholic brother 100 years later to be a temporal political tool for Jesuit theater on the Jesuit stage of the world. If you want to know why they created it for the French Revolution. That was the first thing they used. And before the French Revolution, Freemasonry is just one thing. Before that, they created the Rosicrucians in Bavaria. For the first 30 Years' War, Franz Xavier Werns, the Superior General of the Jesuits, he was a German Jesuit. You want to know why Roger Boscovich, who created the germ theory, why did he call it Germany?
Where did the term cell come from? Where did cells come from? As in biological cells?
Yeah, and the Rose, like he was the Rosicrucian Order's invisible superior, or not Franz Xavier Werns. Sorry, he was from like the 1900s. Here, I'll give it to you. Don't worry, everyone. We're gonna be getting into Manly P Hall, but we gotta set the ground. We gotta set the groundwork. This is good stuff. This is good stuff.
Absolutely, it's critical for people to know.
And
I
let's not.
constantly want to.
Sorry,
Nick,
well,
I want to
go.
constantly back out from the details of the trees, and I want to constantly back out for the forest on because we're gaining new listeners every day.
Yeah.
And so I want to back out from these details and constantly reaffirm why this information is so important, so critical. That's why we started off with how people would never associate. All they get told is how poor Catholics, when they came to America, were just beat down and wouldn't even be allowed to vote. Meanwhile, you have the United States Navy being created by an Irish Roman Catholic. You have the first Secretary of Commerce being it was Jesuit trained, Eric. Unbelievable.
Yeah, that being George Cordelou.
Hey, well, let's not forget the Marine Corps was based on the Jesuit the Venetians of the Marine Corps
and Loyola's spiritual disciplines. George, you trying to give an example, George?
Well, actually, time. Okay, if I could, I know I've been quiet most of the broadcast, but I need to chime in. As I mentioned, at my local state college in the spring of each year, on Tuesday afternoons, 4 to 6, since 1984, they've been doing a lecture series on the Holocaust and genocides. Not just what happened in Europe in the 1930s and 40s, but other ones like Rwanda in the 1990s, Armenia in the 1910s, and so forth. Well, and so each week they have a different speaker or different presentation. Sometimes they'll show a video. Well, anyhow, this Tuesday coming up, and I mentioned this name before, and just as a reminder, the professor who hosts these lectures is Diane Parnas. She's a political science professor. She got her PhD from Georgetown. This Tuesday coming up, I guess that would be the 18th, if I'm not mistaken, Tuesday the 18th. The lecture is going to be called No Irish Need Apply, hosted by Kathleen Noonan, who's actually a history professor at this school. I've mentioned Noonan before. She got her undergraduate degree from Georgetown. So we're going to be getting a double-barrel dose of Jesuitism. I'm planning on going to lecture this Tuesday. And so they're going to be giving this to us from both barrels.
George, those examples are so good and so critical because they explain how fundamentalist evangelical Christian seminaries are still controlled by Jesuits, how secular non-Catholic colleges are still controlled by Jesuit doctrines, because the professors that teach there, the administrators that run these facilities, they're all, or not all, but there's so many of them, are Jesuit trained or are Roman Catholic priests. I love to bring up the scene from the Keepers, the Netflix. Netflix is so dominated by Catholic agendas, we call it Romeflix, that 50 years after they were raping and trafficking kids at Archbishop Keogh in Baltimore, and all of the monster priests got away with it. 50 years, they finally did a documentary. Now that the priests are dead and gone, it was safe to do a documentary and show how Netflix is bravely stepping up to the plate to talk about these monsters after the fact. They had the victim. The only reason we have the documentary of the Keepers is not because the kids were raped and abused and trafficked to the cops and the priests and everybody in the town, but because the victim was a nun. Because a nun, Catherine Sesnick, may have been at risk to stepping up. She knew what was going on. She didn't immediately put her foot down and say, whoa, 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 I'm going to the cops right now. No, there were some rumblings that she might step up and cause trouble for those monsters. And so she was raped and murdered, probably by someone with the nickname Skippy, not to be confused with Skippy Podesta, or maybe to be confused with him. Catherine Sesnick, Nick. Catherine Sesnick was part of a program that sent Catholic clergy incognito in their civvies to public schools around the city. And there's a picture of her in her civvies teaching in a school, in a class, and nobody has any idea she's a nun. How much of that has gone on and continues to go on to this day? So that's why George's information is so critical. Education, number one, is purposefully dysfunctional. It creates slaves. It does not create functional children. Teaches them how to put condoms on cucumbers. Doesn't teach them computers. Doesn't teach them cars. Doesn't teach them banking, loans, medicine. It teaches them everything that'll make them future slaves, George. And who's teaching them? People who are either Jesuit trained or Jesuit themselves, George.
Yeah, Podesta is the name given to certain high officials in many Italian cities beginning in the later Middle Ages. Mainly, it meant the chief magistrate of a city-state, the counterpart to similar positions in other cities that went by other names.
Oh, okay,
Example,
I realize
rectors.
Nick basically had the floor.
But it could also mean local administrator who was the representative, the Holy Roman Emperor. That's what Podesta is. I put the link in the chat.
Yeah, and both of them, that guy, both brothers have been implicated in child sex slave trafficking, George. You're trying to jump in. George, you got something for us or not?
Can I tie the Venetians to the Marine Corps?
Sure.
All right. Well, okay. So before Loyola created the Society of Jesus, and he had a broken leg when he was with the secret police in
I realize
Spain.
Nick basically has the floor, but if I could just take the mic for a moment. Oh, yes.
George has some kind of serious lag, Nick. We're just going to have to work with it. George, you got a lag going on there. You're jumping in and out at bad times. Go ahead and give what you have. Only George could have this level of technical difficulty. He's got to have some serious lag.
Yes, go
on his
ahead.
stream. I don't know what. Yeah, just jump in when you can, George. You may have to get out of the stream and come back in, George, because it appears you have some kind of crazy lag and you're jumping in and out at bad times.
Okay, I'm talking. Serves sec. I'm. You might hear me.
Good grief.
All right. Well, I'll just go anyways.
Yeah.
All right. So, so when he was in he created this, the first secret police under Charles the Third of Spain, Charles II, I mean, right? And this is when he was in the war, the civil war in Spain. And this is before he got his leg blown up and stuff. Anyways, after that, after the failed assassination of the Emperor of the Netherlands, another group that helped him was the infamous Borgia headed to Rome with Giuliano de Medici, Pope Clement VII. Anyway, so Loyola failed the attempt to kill the emperor, but 40 days later, in September 25th, 1534, Pope Clement Giuliano de Medici was dead, and Alessandro Farnese was elected the new pope. So I'm pretty sure the monarchs of Spain got Xavier and a Loyola and Bobadilla and Samoa and Borgia to assassinate the pope at the time to create the Society of Jesus. But anyways, Alessandro Farnese was elected the new pope. Evading capture, Ignatius Loyola did not return to Paris, but instead traveled straight to Venice where he was warmly received by his old friend, Doge Andrea Gritti. But before Venice would help sponsor with the new Pope Paul III the creation of Loyola's International Police Force, Loyola would need to demonstrate his talents once again and help Venice create a new professional sea-bound military force. Until this time, the Venetians had generally used the military skills of others and their brilliance at banking and finance to broker some deal or payment for the necessary militia skills known historically as lagunari. But the Ottoman Empire and the professional standing armies of Europe meant such kind of rent-a-war was no longer viable, especially as Venice continued to face increasing attack. The solution by Inigo de Loyola for the Venetians was the formation of the first permanent professional military units of Venice, known officially as the Marine Corps, a smaller army, a few thousand highly trained, highly motivated soldiers sworn by sacred oath to unquestionable and absolute allegiance and honor. The word marine meaning sea, and the word corpse meaning, in this context, bank of knights. Therefore, the first Marine Corps in history meaning literal band of sea knights, the name Fanta de Mar, infantry of the sea, a deliberate distraction to hide their official name.
Hey, Nick, we might have to close out. I don't know how we're going to end the chat. We're going to end the stream if Eric's got to go. Eric, were you going to be able to make it back in order to end it? Or we just...
Yeah, I'll be able to. Yeah, I'm just sorry. Just something came up. Just my parents are calling me, and I have to attend to some familial matters. But yeah, I'll be able to. Were you guys wanting to end it a little after the 2-hour mark? I'll be able to end the stream. So
yeah, let's wrap it up. Sure, let's wrap it up at 2 hours. We'll go another 20 minutes.
No, sounds good with me. I apologize for the inconvenience. Just just kind of something familial stuff came out of the blue, and I'm in a situation where I'm moving soon. So there's just kind of a whole bunch of stuff going on.
Sure, yeah. We got a lot of changes going on here too. So it's we're doing the best we can, and as long as you can continue to manage it from a distance, outstanding. We're hopefully we're going to try and do a stream, Nick and I, on Tuesday at like 1 Eastern, and we'll let everybody know.
Tuesday, yeah, I should be free to go Tuesday.
Excellent. And I think we're going to do it from Nick's channel. So we'll do that from his end and see how this OBS thing works. Love to have you there. Good.
No, sounds good. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, but I'll keep the stream going here so you guys can keep the broadcast going. Great information.
Good.
That you guys are getting out here.
Good. So, thanks for hosting, bro. Hope everything goes okay with.
Thanks for hosting, Eric.
Oh, my pleasure, guys. Yeah, everything's good here. Just my time. I gotta put my attention over to this at the moment.
All right, brother.
No worries.
God bless, guys, and all the best. I'll see you on Tuesday.
Sounds good. See you then. Nick, give me that. Give me this specific source again, because that's fantastic. That's some of the most detailed stuff I've heard connecting the Marine Corps, the Marine Corps to the Jesuits, which I always knew intuitively, having spent 4 years in the Marine Corps myself, 4 or 5 years in the Marine Corps.
I put the link in the private chat.
I will grab it. Excellent.
Yo, so I'll just say should I do the Manly P Hall stuff?
Yeah, go ahead. First, big picture. Why do we care about Freemasons? Who is Manly P Hall in relation to the Freemasons? And then give your information.
All right. We care about Freemasons because they're the head of directing and controlling political matters for the Jesuits in a secular way, disguised as a secular way.
I would say, Nick, maybe if folks were really curious about this, they could go online and type in something like famous Freemasons. It's amazing what the Freemasons themselves will admit to. Usually helpful, like we're talking about the keepers, 20, 30, 40, 50 years after the fact, after the criminal machinations were done, after the crimes were committed, then they'll step back and proudly remark, so-and-so is a Freemason. Type in presidents who are Freemasons. Type in astronauts who are Freemasons. Type in big business Freemasons. Then you'll get an appreciation for why this is important. What we're giving you here is how Freemasonry is nothing more than a tool of the Vatican, the Jesuit-controlled Vatican, to conduct these crimes with plausible deniability without immediate connection to the Jesuits or to Rome. And big picture on the Jesuits are the special forces of Rome. The Jesuits have the power of Rome. They are the tip of the spear of Rome. They have been known to murder popes who were not pope enough. Pardon me. Nick gave you an example one or two streams ago of how a Jesuit, it was, what did you say? It was Borgia, who had murdered the superior general because he wasn't pure enough. He had a little bit of Jewish blood in him.
Yeah, he wasn't supposed to be the superior general. He was supposed to be the second one. And then the Pope that came after him didn't even know what was going on. Elected the superior general of the Jesuits, which is not supposed to happen. The Jesuits are supposed to do it.
It's supposed to be a Jesuit conclave that elects a superior general.
Right. Yeah, so if you want a little background on Freemasonry, okay, so people need to understand that it was the Rosicrucian order that pretty much there would be no lodges of Freemasonry. Freemasonry wouldn't really exist if it weren't for the Rosicrucian order. And I'll just say this before we get into Manly PL. If you've been unknowingly counter-reformed by certain Jesuit coadjutors to look for bloodlines behind the creation of Jesuits and the Rosicrucians, people will like to say that the sovereign order of the Elder Brethren Rose Cross, allegedly the original Rosicrucians during the early 14th century, are the people who are behind it all, right? They're the real people that control the world. Okay. It would be, if you're looking for a bloodline, then it would be none other than the non-ancient, non-papal, non-black nobility Bohemian Rosenberg family, created around 1250, established by the Vitokovici clan. Their coat of arms and emblem was represented by a 5-petal rose on a silver field, which is still often seen in considerable parts of southern Bohemia. But the Rosenberg family did not use the rose symbol for their family until 1322, when the legendary ancient papal Rex Deus black nobility Orsini dynasty, who were descended from the Edomite Julian Claudian dynasty of ancient Rome, absorbed the Rosenberg family and created the small Orsini-Rosenberg branch. The Orsini carried out a political feud with the papal Rex Deus black nobility Colonna dynasty, which absorbed the Pallavinici family of Cecil, the Stuarts, the Venetian Stuarts of England. And the Colonna dynasty is the ancient Roman dukes of Tusculum. For centuries, they carried out a political feud with the Orsini for centuries in Rome, until it was stopped by a papal bull in 1511. In 1571, the heads of both families married nieces of Pope Sixtus V, who was assassinated by the Jesuits. Under the order of Jesuit Superior General Claudio Acquavia, S.J., the name Orsini comes from the root word Ursa, which then later created 2 constellations after their own name, that being Ursa Major and Minor. The symbol of Ursa Major is the bear, because the logo of the Orsini family is a bear. However, the Orsini go back even further to before the founding of Rome. The root word Ursa for Orsini comes from the root word Arsu, referring to the Babylonian androgynous fallen angel Arsu. Behold the Nephilim connection, which was and still is attributed to the morning/evening star worshipped 3,500 years ago and to this day. Now, the original Orsini coat of arms, going all the way back to Orso Barbone in the 11th century, has the 5-pointed dragon face, vaginal rose line on it. All before the Rosenberg family used it, before the Templars used it, and before the Rose Cross Rosicrucians used it. The current head of the Orsini dynasty is Prince Domenico Napoleon Orsini, who was a Knight of Malta. The sovereign military of Malta was given over to the Jesuits in 1540 secretly, then publicly in 1818, whose current Grand Master is Jesuit Giacomo del Toro del Sempi de Sanguineto. He's a Jesuit who takes orders from his superior general Arturo Sosa first and foremost. All the heads of the papal black nobility families go to Rome and bow their heads to the white pope.
All right, so Nick, would you say the powerful Orsini family is higher up, or the Jesuits are higher up?
Well, all these black nobility families go and kiss the white pope, right? But the white pope kisses the black pope's hand.
I think you just said. I think you already told us.
Right.
Both the Orsini family, who we also have Knights of Malta. It sure seems like even those powerful so-called black nobility families, they still answer to the superior general. Sure seems like that. That was your point 2 streams ago, is that even the disappeared black nobility families, the Colonna, the Orsini, the Aldobrandini, the Medici, the Borgia, even those powerful families whom themselves have put out 2, 3, sometimes 4 popes and countless numbers of cardinals and bishops, they still seem that they're subservient to the company of Loyola.
Yeah. And people have there's so many people who are counter-reformed that the Freemasons control the world, and the Freemasons are controlled by the Jesuits. I've diligently scoured through dozens of counter-reformed Jesuit coadjutor and Masonic historians' works, translating some from even Latin and French and German, and have documented that it is Jesuit-created Masonic tradition and history to promulgate the fact that the Rosicrucians could not have been infiltrated by the Jesuits, as well as the idea that the Jesuits hated the Rosicrucians. The only thing is, the Jesuits had never denounced the Rosicrucian order. Only Masonic historians 300 to 200 years later kept alive the tradition that the Rosicrucians were the ones who denounced the Jesuits, just as Jesuit-created Freemasonry was when it was created, and just as the Jesuit-created Bavarian Illuminati did when it was created, a linear Jesuit pattern. There are no other manuscripts dated before 1616 that suggest it, fairly meaning that the Rosicrucian order could only have been invented from 1614 to 1616 at most. The only manuscripts literally have available that suggest the 16th century Rosicrucian order was originally founded in the 1300s are the 3 Rosicrucian manuscripts published pseudonymously in 1616 by the Rosicrucian order itself. The person who published them, Andrea Valentina Andreas, he has another book. On the front cover is the Jesuit seal on it. Okay, because that was a pseudonym of Francis Bacon, and Francis Bacon was the alter ego of Jesuit Toby Matthew. There's a book called Francis Bacon, Toby Matthew's Alter Ego, written by a Roman Catholic bishop. Anyway, so it is interesting to note that the 3 Rosicrucian manuscripts published in 1616 were intentionally released in a specific area. What area would that be? The same exact area where the birth of the Protestant Reformation happened. The exact same reason the Jesuit order was solely officiated by the Roman Catholic Church to destroy. The hotbed for Jesuit intrigue, and coincidentally, 1616, 1 year after Matteo Viticellecci SG, the Superior General of the Jesuits from 1615 to 45, launched his Jesuit Counter-Reformation First 30 Years' War from 1614 to 44, overseeing the Jesuit Inquisition and crusade responsible for the loss of 8 million lives in the Holy Roman Empire. So, do the math, not the Jesuit mental gymnastics. So this is all a background for what Freemasonry is. Now I'll just go into Manly P. Hall, who is a famous Freemason. He was American Freemason.
Let's go ahead and underline and highlight the importance of the Counter-Reformation, Nick. Why this is so critical to them. This is, the floodgates have been opened. The floodgates have been opened, and they've been opened by the movable type printing press and Luther's protest. It's bad enough that Luther should take a stand against unbiblical teaching, but then he was put in safekeeping by Frederick the Wise and the castle of Würzburg. I want to say it's Würzburg.
Yeah, the Wartburg Castle.
Yeah, Wartburg Castle. And there he basically had nothing to do. He used up his time asking for the Greek and Hebrew and Latin manuscripts of his still Catholic friend Desiderius Erasmus, and went about translating the scriptures into common German.
Mhm.
And this was, along with the efforts of guys like William Tyndale and other translators, this broke the back at the time of the Catholic Church and ushered in a new level of warfare. Up until that time, the Catholic Church owned, dominated, and perverted Christianity. This is the whole purpose of the beginning of the protest, was the exploitation of the common Christian as Catholics and extorting them with indulgences to pay the clergy for their orgies and their outrages and their excesses, because they were buying themselves out of purgatory, buying their dead children out of purgatory and into salvation and into heaven. Absolutely outrageous. The reason why it was so different in 1517, Nick, was because the movable type printing press was able to put Bibles in the hands of the common person faster than they could be burned. And this facilitated a new strategy by Rome to, as Cardinal Wolsey in England called it, and Saucy remarked on this, learning versus learning, which is basically to take learning and twist it into lies.
Yeah,
So
one of the there was a company of engineers in France during the first 30 years of war going on in all of the Holy Roman Empire, created by the Jesuits, and this company was responsible for inventing cannons, or not inventing but creating cannons, and they sold them to the Germans. And they were these two brothers. I forgot what their names were, but these two brothers were devout Roman Catholics, and I'm pretty sure one of the people on my website in their history of Freemasonry goes on and talks about how like they were under the provision of one of the bishops in Paris. But like, here's a quote from Connor O'Mahony, S.J., 1594. He was born 1594 and died 1656. He's an English Jesuit, professor of moral theology at the University of Evora, and author of explanatory argument concerning the authority of the Kingdom of Ireland on behalf of the Irish Catholics against English heretics. This is what he says. This is from his book, 1645. He says, "My dear Irish, go on and perfect the work of your liberty and defense, which is so happily begun by you, and kill all the heretics and all that do assist and defend them. You have, in the space of 4 or 5 years, that is between the years 1641 and 1645, wherein I write this, killed 150,000 heretics, as your enemies acknowledge. Neither do I deny it, and for my own part, as I verily believe you have killed more of them, so I would to God you have killed them all, which you must either do or drive them all out of Ireland, that our holy land may be plagued no longer with such a barbarous, ignorant, and lawless generation of people."
Yeah, Ireland has been a huge battleground from the very beginning.
I have a sick quote from King Gustavus Adolphus, the King of Sweden. He's known as one of the greatest military commanders of all time. And he's known as the father of modern warfare. He led Sweden to military supremacy during Jesuit Superior General Matteo Vudiceleci's first 30 years of war. Widely commemorated by Protestants in Europe as the main defender of their cause during it, with multiple Protestant churches and foundations. Specifically, became a successful book writer in Europe of Jesuit collections. He burned their Jesuit libraries and stuff. His domestic reforms transformed backward the papacy's medieval dark age economy and society. And after this guy died, this king of Sweden died, the Jesuits infiltrated Sweden and created the Order of the Seraphim. And the Swedish Order of the Seraphim has the Jesuit IHS on it. And anyways, this is a quote from him. He says, "There are 3 L's I should like to see hanged: the Pontiff Leo the 11th, the Jesuit layman, and the Jesuit Laurentius Forer." It's pretty cool.
Wow. It looks like they're also in the book God's Bankers. There's a direct tie between the Vatican Bank and the German munitions manufacturer Krupp, Krupp.
Yeah, it might be them. But let's
Hey,
get into
real quick, Nick, as an administrative note, folks in the chat, let me tell you something. This stuff that we're seeing of chats being deleted and disappeared and people wondering where it's happening, I'm telling you, folks, it's an absolute miracle that we're able to broadcast it all. I'm seeing now, this is aside from people coming in and writing things they shouldn't write to start strife, trolls popping in with weird profiles. No, we're talking about regulars here who come to the chat and are nothing but good fans. They're having problems with their chat. A lot of times we have people that don't even get a notification that we're going live. This is YouTube. This is what YouTube does. I've had people tell me that they've been unsubscribed from my channel, didn't even realize it, had to resubscribe multiple times. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and spread this around. Nick is going to fire his channel up. We're going to continue to broadcast from Eric's channel, which is where we are right now, by the way. I'm going to attempt to take our streams, download them, and re-upload them to my channel. You won't get them live. You won't get the chat, but at least you'll be able to get that as well afterwards. So listen, folks, we're doing the best we can. We're swimming upstream. We're swimming against a lot of problems, challenges, and hopefully, Nick, do you want to go ahead? Do you have the link for your channel?
I'll get it right now.
Yeah, go ahead and grab that and throw that in the chat.
I can't post links in the chat.
All right, we got to give you rights. I put it in the private chat, and I'll put it in the live chat.
I send it to you.
We are hoping to run on Nick's channel this coming Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, and I will also put that in my social networking as well. So just wanted to give folks a heads up as we wrap things up here. Nick, didn't mean to throw you off there.
All right, well, let's get into Manly B Hall now that we've set the groundwork.
Sure.
All right, so Freemason Manly P. Hall, famous Freemason Manly P. Hall, admits he is an agent working for the Jesuits in his 1944 letter. And before we get into his quotes, let's just set the groundwork foundation for all of this. So in 1844, 33rd degree Freemason and Knight of Malta, Konstantin von Tischendorf, and he's seen in pictures with the hidden hand, the Master of the Second Veil, in his shirt, and he's got the Maltese cross. He's a Knight of Malta. Anyways, he met, or not in 1844, before, and I believe it was 1835 or 37. He met with Jesuit Cardinal Angelo May, S.J., and Pope Gregory XVI at the Vatican. They disclosed to Tischendorf that the Vatican had retrieved so the Vatican knew this was a known fake Bible manuscript, and it was penned by Constantine Simonides as a present for Tsar Nicholas I of Russia. Anyway, and Constantine Simonides, who made this fake Bible manuscript, he knew it was fake, and he wasn't trying to do anything. He wasn't trying to make a real Bible manuscript like the Jesuits. He was just making something that looked fake, or that looked old and ancient, and he was trying to give it to the Tsar Nicholas I of Russia as a present. And he was an Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox monk, and he penned this. He made this manuscript on an Eastern Orthodox peninsula in Greece that no one can go to except for Eastern Orthodox people. It's like totally off limits and quarantined.
Nick, let's back out and give big picture again. So you're talking about, I believe it's the Codex Sinaiticus, correct?
Yeah, I'll get into that.
The foundation of all modern Bible translations, which was supposedly found by Konstantin von Tischendorf, who was not Catholic, right? He was not connected to the Catholic Church in any way, and yet he was.
Oh no, he was.
He was skulking around in an Egyptian convent, and he just found it in like a waste paper basket there, right?
Yeah. So when he went to the Vatican, they disclosed to him that they found that they found. They retrieved this known fake Bible manuscript penned by Constantine Simonides as a present for Tsar Nicholas I of Russia, and that they stashed it in the Roman Catholic St. Catherine's Monastery in Egypt, in the Sinai Peninsula, even though that's not where even the that's not even where the real Mount Sinai is. And they told him to go gather it, to stain it to make it look older, and to say he found a 4th century Alexandrian Bible manuscript, making it the oldest and therefore the purest. So Cardinal Angelo May was already working on the Textus Vaticanus. Now, if you look up the Textus Vaticanus, they say it's like, found in the 14th century too, and it's Alexandrian. But it's proven fact that it was created by Cardinal May. And anyway, so these Jesuit forgeries of the Textus Vaticanus and the Textus Sinaiticus is the base text of the ESV, the English Standard Version, the NIV, the non-inspired version, the NASB, the New Living Translation, and virtually every single Bible translation except for the KJV and the Geneva Bible. Now, I'm not talking about, you got to read the Geneva Bible and the KJV and that's it. I'm talking about, listen to what we're saying and think about it. It is so the Bibles that use this text is so corrupted and distorted beyond imagination. For example, in Matthew, when he goes to say he's going to go to the Passover in Jerusalem, he tells his family, I'll meet you there later. In this one, it says he doesn't go to the Passover meal, but he tells them that he's going to go there anyway. So it makes him a liar. Okay. So it makes Jesus a liar. It removes verses. For another instance is, it denies Jesus ascending on the 3rd day. It includes the books, the Shepherd of Hermes, Hermes, the Shepherd of Hermes and Hermes. These are Gnostic books.
Let me go ahead.
The Old Testament, it's missing so many other books in the Old Testament, and it's in shreds and tears and tatters.
Well, let me back out and give big picture again, brother. You're doing a phenomenal job on this. For me personally, this is not a recommendation to stay only with, for instance, the King James. This is not a recommendation. There are other Textus Receptus translations, the Geneva Bibles, the Textus Receptus. The most important thing is to stress that Christians should not be devastated when they appear to have something in the Bible that makes no sense. Understand that Christian doctrine, and I think I'm pretty on safe ground, even with you, Nick, here, it is absolutely impossible to have a perfect translation from one language to another. By Christian doctrine, it's the original manuscripts that are inerrant. There is no such thing as an inerrant translation. The very work of translating from one language to another requires some wiggle room there.
Yeah, if you wanna really know what the scriptures say, go and learn Hebrew. That's what I've been practicing, learning Hebrew so I can, read the dictionaries on the old, because it's insane the revelation that comes from it.
Be a good student.
Yeah, prove all things. Study to show yourselves approved.
Amen. It's great to have a hard copy that you rely upon. I've got my hard copy is New American Standard. Not because that was the best, but at the time, that's what I was assured was the most precise. Go online. If you see something that causes you trouble, go online and you can use something like Bible Gateway and create multiple panes of the same verse in different translations. You will be amazed and shocked at what you see, the differences just in the translations. Now, also something to be kept in mind. You know that King James I had Freemason Francis Bacon edit his 1611 Bible.
The thing about that is one of the big promoters of that idea is Manly P. Hall. And there's actually some evidence that it wasn't that Shakespeare, was Edward de Vere and not Francis Bacon.
I'm open to that. There's no hard evidence to go in either way for sure. I'm
just saying, it's because once we get into this, Manly P. Hall, really
Sure.
promoted it against it.
And
But
what we can also mention is that regardless of whether his role was there or not, Bacon was a key figure in England, and his handler was Jesuit Toby Matthew, Sir Toby Matthew, who was knighted by Protestant King James because Protestant King James was working a Catholic marriage through Sir Toby Matthew to shore up his power for one of his children.
It wasn't his handler. I have a book that says it was him.
That's even more powerful. Hey, Eric's got to wrap the stream up, so let's go ahead and close out. We told him 2 hours. We're at 2 hours and 9 minutes. Go ahead and give your quick closing statements, Nick, and we'll wrap it up for Eric.
Just all the quotes that he said.
If you wanted to summarize,
I'll name one. I'll do the first one because it's the best.
Sure,
one.
Go ahead.
All right, so near the end of the Second 30 Years' War, the famous 33rd degree Illuminized Freemason Manly P. Hall believed there was something wrong with the world and that things must change. In the spring of 1944, exactly 100 years since the Jesuits created the Textus Vaticanus and the Textus Sinaiticus forgeries, he made the following statement, quote, "To make things right, we will have to undo much that is cherished error. The problem of revising the Bible shows how difficult it is to do this. For the last 100 years, we have been trying to get out an edition of the Bible that is reasonably correct, but nobody wants it. What's wanted is the good old King James Version, every jot and tittle of it, because most people are convinced that God dictated the Bible to King James in English." That's Manly P. Hall in the magazine Horizon, the spring edition, and it's called Asia in the Balance of Scales, page 13, Los Angeles, 1944.
Why the heck would a Freemason care so much about translation wars? And by the way, he could actually be giving substance to just frothing up the anguish over this, because I certainly don't believe the King James is inspired and inerrant. And even if you hold it in high esteem, do you believe that the King James is inerrant?
No, it's not inerrant. There's multiple passages that are not in the best translation. I think the point is that it wasn't created by a Jesuit.
Yeah, and you make it excellent. It's an excellent,
and that's why it can be trusted over. Bible's using the Sinaiticus and the Vaticanus, these Alexandrian force. They're not even Alexandrian, and even if they were, Alexandria is the friggin' hotbed of Gnosticism.
And here you have non-Jesuit, non-Catholic, so-called secular Freemasons jumping into this fray. They're not worried about the Talmud. They're not worrying about Zoroaster or any other. For some reason, they're fixated. Manly P. Hall, a key Freemason, fixated on what translation Christians need to have the most. This traces the roots of how Freemasonry is nothing more than the foot soldiers of the Vatican. The desire here, the agenda here, is to destroy the connection between the Christian and the scriptures and force confusion upon the average Christian and send them back to Rome for authority. When they ask questions, what do I do about my salvation? What do I do to understand the Bible? The Bible's got all these contradictions. I can't trust it anymore. Those contradictions were put there on purpose to send you back to Rome. Nick, good job.
If you want to, Arnold Harris Matthew, he was born 1852, died 1919, English writer, Roman Catholic, 33rd degree Illuminized Freemason, founder of the first bishop of the Theosophical Left-Hand Path cult of the Old Catholic Church, and co-author of The Life of Sir Toby Matthew, Bacon's Alter Ego. If you want to, you can go read that. It's a 400-page book about how Toby Matthew is Francis Bacon, which would mean he's Andreas Valentina Andrea, founder of the Rosicrucian Order. On one of his books, Mythology Christian A, he had the Jesuit seal on the front cover.
God willing, you will have at least the two of us, maybe more of us, on your channel coming up this Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. And sorry that we lost Eric and George, and hopefully Eric can jump in and close us down, and I'll put this up on my channel. And everybody have a great weekend. Good job, Nick and George and Eric.
Yeah, God bless everyone. Jesus loves you.
Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend.